welcome to the Feeder Series podcast. And it's been a while since I said those words. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. 2025 is here, and F2 and F3 about to start a new era without commentator Alex Jacques. Breaks my heart. I'm your host, Jim Kimberley, and my heart is broken. And fortunately, before we go into that new era, we've got Alex Jacques on the podcast. And Alex Jacques' biggest fan, Josh Revell, joining for a season preview / review / a little bit of everything that we've missed for the last little while without the podcast being on the air. First up, Alex, you're in Australia as of about a week ago, so you said before we started recording, this is the first time Josh has actually been awake at a reasonable hour. How are you enjoying life down under?
Yeah, behind the scenes nonsense for everyone. Normally, Josh is clinging on for dear life when we press record, and then it usually goes on for 2 hours, and the poor man's on the floor by the time that we get to the end. So finally, I'm in a part of the world that allows him to record at a decent time. Now, I've come out here early. I'm in Sydney at the moment. Did the Race of Champions, of which one of the standout drivers in the Race of Champions was Victor Martins. So immediately on topic. Tick that box. That's a wonderful event. That's the first time I've managed to call that event, and yeah, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it, and wonderful to be in a stadium again. And a commentary gantry, and yeah, all the things that I've not had for about a decade, and it was a great event.
Speaking of winter events, we've got Josh Revell, and there's a winter event in the Feeder Series world every single year, and you might be looking at a future Formula One driver as part of that event. How are you, and how do you enjoy, well, let's call it TRS. How do you enjoy TRS this year?
Ironically, I didn't go to any of the rounds this year. I just ended up being way too busy for any of it, but I was at the venue when Roman Belinsky did the proper overtake at last year's New Zealand Grand Prix, which was something. I was in Parc Ferme, and it was on the TV screens, and I was just surrounded by these TR86 drivers, and we're just flabbergasted with what we saw. And apparently, sometime in between that happening and me meeting up with a couple of drivers, it was about 15 minutes. They already gave him the overtake of the award for that year from the organizers, which was just like, okay, good to know that our organizers take the piss out of the championship as much as I do. This year they brought down Arvid Lindblad, and there were rumors swirling around in your guys' Discord of all things about they're going to bring Arvid down here. I was thinking, that's interesting for a couple of reasons. First off, the Middle Eastern Championship Formula Regional has definitely overtaken it in terms of the Winter Series. You only send people down here really if A, you want to view the sights in New Zealand in between the races, or B, you're under the illusion that there's easier competition down here, which, if you look at it from a certain way, there is. But you did the maths, and it's like, well, if he wins this, because he's going to be with M2, which is the best team, he's going to have the super license points. And to segue into the relevant combo here, he doesn't technically need to do F2 this year. He could sort of wait in the wings if he wants to. He could finish last in F2. It won't happen, but he could finish last in F2 this year. He'd still have the super license points to go there to F1. And it makes you think, look, this is not beyond Red Bull. A mid-season swap may happen. We sort of know the history with the musical chairs. So it does make you think, but you know, from what we saw from Arvid in the Oceania Championship, what we're bound to see in F2 is an exciting prospect, for sure. Typically with Red Bull Juniors that have come through, it's like exciting talent, but you always suspect there's some development work needed. Arvid looks pretty good here, so it'll be interesting to see not just how this year goes, but how next year goes, because we know where he's headed.
Yeah, Formula One is going into a crazy sort of, well, new regulations, but a new era this year, and then next year, of course. But this year, and it's just such a wonderful time to watch as somebody who's watched Feeder Series for a good few years, because it's basically the Feeder Series takeover. We've got, well, depending on your definition, about 50 rookies, I think Formula One sometimes say, then the other times they say 4, and so it.
Oh yeah, give the people what they want. Rookie chat. Yeah. Who's a rookie? Who's not a rookie? Oh, great. That's what people wanted over testing, isn't it?
If you are listening to the Feeder Series podcast, rookies are the talk of the town, because we're going into a year with drivers that we've seen going through the ranks.
Yeah.
And it's almost like for all of the Dragoviches and all of the besties and all of the ones who are nearly there. Teo Porcher, it feels like for all of those guys, this is the time. This was the year they actually needed to be, or last year, the year they needed to be in F2 to be at the precipice of the top. Now, Alex, you've narrated and called a lot of these drivers. Let's brief. We're not going to do an F1 podcast. You're on the wrong podcast, Alex. As you're an F1 big wig
I'm
these
genuinely
days.
in the wrong place. I mean, contractually, I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to do this anymore. But anyway, I like recording this every year.
Oh, it means a lot, and you're more than welcome to come back, even if you just want to talk and remember how things were. But we're going into Formula One 2025,
Yeah.
and there are rookies, there are drivers you've been calling, and not just these ones coming in this year, but most of the grid you've been calling since they were kids. But this year in particular, Antonelli, Doohan, Bortolet, etc. How much change have you seen in Formula One the last few years for the level of quality that you're seeing going up compared to, I don't even know, 20, well, when did you start actually? When did you start calling the GP2?
I started in 2015, so I did 10 seasons.
Wow.
And the standard was always really, really high. Racing was always really good. But to get Alex Albon on the testing broadcast called it a second wave, and he was referring to the original wave being him, Lando Norris, and George Russell. And obviously, the driver that finished fourth at championship as well, Nick De Vries, got to go. Didn't work out for him, but he got a shot at least, and that's what you're always hoping for. It's great they're all going to get an opportunity. That's the point. That's how it should be. You mentioned Felipe Drugovich, Frederick Vesti, Teo Porcher. The one disappointment when we're talking about this new wave of rookies is that we couldn't have had at least one of them through. And I just don't understand why we went from no changes to an entirely new generation. I'm relieved that we have gone to an new blood in the sport because I think we needed it for Formula One, and I think Carlos Sainz's appendix has a lot to do with that. There you go. Because the moment that you stuck, and Fred Vasseur as well, Fred Vasseur, it could have easily put Hulkenberg in that car and gone, I reckon I can chase, I can definitely get solid points with Hulkenberg. Okay. You're always under pressure as Ferrari boss. You never know whether you're going to lose out by a thin margin of points, say, by the time you get to Abu Dhabi. The moment Behrman gets in the car and is on the brink of making Q3 with no prep, gets points with no prep, was the moment that every single team principal turned the page and suddenly rookies are back in fashion. It's brilliant that they are.
I think it was one of the things you said last year with regards to the rookie testing that we've been having with the FP1s. I say testing, it's not really the right word, but the rookie FP1s, and it really made me think in a different way of the rookies who reach the top, because you said the family goes there. It's a whole thing. Even if you don't make F1, it's that 1 or 2 weekends where you're the driver. You're in a Formula One car. You're on circuit with Hamilton and Alonso, and they're increasing that. Is that were they listening to the podcast? Were they listening to your footnotes to say?
Well, I think they need to. I think they need to keep increasing it as well, because the great thing about that session is that it's a major moment for the family, and even if the dream doesn't work out, they still get that moment on track, as we discussed last year. But the sessions, if you only get one across the year, you're basically driving in total fear that you're going to bin the car. So I think it's great
Not
that you
people
get
get a
multiple.
drive if you bin the car at Monza. You get a drive immediately. So maybe it's the way to do it.
Or I'm glad I was paying attention. There's some FP1s where you're just playing yourself into the weekend. And Monza, I think I'm just naturally excited to be at Monza. Yeah, thank goodness, like we were up and running because that was very early for that to happen. But no, I'd like them to have more sessions like that, because 3 hours of practice is almost too many hours of practice. So it's great to have that new narrative, and it's great for everyone to see new names and talented names, and you never know whether there's a head-turning moment. Ayo Komatsu said that the moment they put Behrman in FP1, they knew he was going to be their race driver. That was it. 1 hour, they knew. So it's great. I would love to see that expand even further. And as you say, they've potentially been listening.
Well, hello there if you are listening. Josh Revell might be saying some offensive things. He doesn't speak for us. We're feeder series. It's slightly separate. And he's got himself on mute.
These
like
guys
a good
absolve
boy, Josh.
themselves from everything that I have ever said, and rightly so. You don't need any lawyers. Just know that I'm just this rogue guy they brought in for the views and the clicks.
Hey, the views and the clicks gave us some quality content about Jack Doohan a couple of seasons ago, who's now a Formula One driver, Josh. So thank you for that. Josh, do you have any thoughts about the class of 25 going up yourself before we go into the actual feeder series world.
Has there been a rookie lineup that has had this much press and attention since 2001? And there are some aspects which are similar. There was a guy called Kimmy. There's a few things that do cross over that are similar in that regard. You can never tell who's going to be a world champion out of that bunch. Could be any one of them, but it's still exciting because we know what we've got. It depends upon who you want to classify as a rookie. There are still people that call Liam a rookie, and it's like, that's a gray area. Because granted, he hasn't had the proper prep that a full-time rookie would have. Over half the circuits he wouldn't have driven at. Like this weekend, I think he's only had 3 or 4 hot lap sessions in a V8 supercar last year. Even the F2 drivers that came up from last year, they would have raced there last year. So, it's a bit of a handicap for sure, but then again, the prep that goes into this, it shouldn't take all that long for him to get familiarized. And that applies to a lot of the rookies, but, even who people would regard as the lesser prospects out of this class are still class. They're still amazingly good drivers. There are some aspects of almost all of them. Of course, no one comes in as the complete package. And you do hope that they will, sort themselves out and develop and morph into the driver that they can potentially be, in which case, you've got half a grid there virtually of these potential future stars. But as we know, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes it's just the luck of the draw about where you're being placed, which concerns me a bit with people like Borto. Like, I remember a couple of years ago in the F3 preview, I think it was, where you guys put up a poll about who you thought was going to be the top Trident driver, and he got 3rd out of the bunch, I think. And it's just like,
nobody saw Bortoletto coming.
Well, I think Jakesy and I had a bit of a modicum of understanding that Borto, a lot of people are sleeping on this guy, and he proved it over the next couple of years.
Bortoletto for the title. We said Bortoletto for the title, and not only Bortoletto for the title, Bortoletto to dominate. And no one should check that podcast. But we did say.
Exactly. You should just take us at our word, and that's why we are where we are. But the thing is that we know what he's done over the last couple of years, and apart from being quick, he's a smart driver, which I think is, rare amongst the youngins nowadays. So that's good to take him to this level of racing, but he's in a Sauber, which is, concerning. Given where they're at, their pace deficit, you can have the best race of your life, but if you finish down in 16th, 17th, no one's going to take notice of it. You really just got to hedge your bets on, performing at a time where, the potential beckons for a rare amount of points, or we know where Hulk's at. And if you can get a stranglehold on him and, usurp him quite noticeably, people will pay attention to that. So there's definitely opportunity here for Borto to show his stuff. But I'm hopeful that Borto will do well. I think he will do well because there's been nothing these last couple of years to suggest that he'll be a flunk here. But everyone knows about Antonelli. I don't think I need to add anything more to that. The highest profile rookie we've had in ages, I guess. Like, what more can be said that hasn't already been said? The situation with Doohan, I've definitely had my reservations about him, for sure. But irrespective of that, he deserves a chance, and the fact that there's a good chance that his career has already been decided by now is asinine. He should be given that chance. Even if it's only 5 races, you don't know what you're going to get from him. And if it turns out he does beat Gasly, and you still drop him, what have you done? It's completely nonsensical to me, and it's sad as well. Because everyone should be given a fair cop, and it's going to take more than 5 races, for God's sake. It's not looking great for him because it's a lot of money that has been spent to get Colapinto to where he is, even though I'm a big believer in Colapinto, but...
Well, we all are. Who can't be? But fair is fair.
We all are for sure, but irrespective of whether I have belief in Borto, Doohan should be given his fair cop. Hadjar, 12 months ago I said I did not see the hype in this guy, and now I do. I do see the light, and that is not at all because I had egg on my face. However, I am just a bit worried about one aspect of him. He says he is in control of his emotions almost all the time, or at least all of the time, depending upon where you quote him from. If he thinks so, cool, but what you don't want to see is that affecting him in the lower ranks of racing for sure. Because if it affects you there, and you go up to Formula One, it's not going to work out for you. So I hope he has got that under control, because otherwise he's got a lot to offer the sport. And I'm guessing he's going to be the first guy to beat Yuki Tsunoda in that intra-team battle at Minardi for the first time since Gasly left.
Yeah.
Was there anyone else I missed out on? Rookies.
We've
Oh,
got
the bear.
we've got the Lawson and the Bearman, but let's skip past them a little bit, because just you've touched on something there which I think is actually a good segue for Alex, talking about the emotions coming across the radio. And
Yep.
I don't know if you saw, Alex, or not, but seeing as we are waving goodbye to you from the Feeder Series world, and your voice in our ears and calling everything, there was something which we are very excited for Chris McCarthy, of course, to be stepping up, but we are very sad to be saying goodbye to you. So we did ask some of the audience for any of the moments that stand out for them in the past before we do say hello to Mr. McCarthy. One of them on Instagram was he was brilliant. Alex Jacques was brilliant. What was one of the favourite things? Probably anything concerning Dan Ticktum's greatest hits. I did want to have this opportunity to let you kind of reflect a little bit on where you have come from. And Dan Ticktum, always like a Feeder Series legend. How do you reflect on Dan now looking back and how his career has gone? And you getting to call some of those radio messages and try and explain what had happened to the audience.
Yeah, I mean, not specifically on Dan. I remember, I think it was Magello where I was like the greatest hits of Dan Ticktum available at the end of the year. Uh, and then, yeah, too much time with Brundle. Like you start thinking in one-liners the entire time, it rubs off. I think just generally to open it up as a broad, like you cannot ask, these are junior motor racing championships. Yes, we love them. Yes, they're incredibly exciting. But you've got to remember these are teenage athletes. And the one thing I think I'd ask everyone to do is take a bad day from your teenage years, take a bad day from your early 20s, and see how eloquent you were at your worst moment. I certainly wouldn't want, my moody moments transmitted because it would be toe curling. And the thing is, they're under that microscope from Formula 3 days now. The team radio department at FOM, absolutely brilliant. They work so quickly to turn that around and to give us a wider picture. But, I love Oscar Piastri's mentality because it's his mentality. He's not playing a character. And I don't want my junior drivers to play a character. I want it completely unfiltered. Obviously, there's a professional standard. You cannot be swearing in your engineer's ear. You can't be berating the team. But can you blow off a bit of steam? Can you use that as a result? Interesting point that Jolyon Palmer made a few years ago is he felt that the team radio part of the broadcast had made drivers hit the button and get on the phone to the world in a way that he just didn't grow up with. And it's almost self-fulfilling. I think sometimes if it's like an active mistake, if you press the button and you make a clown of yourself, then you can be, I think, fairly criticized for it. If you've just been spun off at turn one, of course you're going to be raging. Of course you're going to be fuming. And I don't want those young drivers who are still finding their way. I don't want to lose that part of the journey because that's all part of the progression and seeing the rough version of the driver move to the finished article.
You've raised a very good point, but I would like just to almost reflect on before you embark on your world of F1 only, and it is only F1 you're doing from now on. You're going to be a free man basically. What are you going to do with all this time? But you've had so many years. Is there anything that actually stands out to you in particular, away from any of the comments that we've got, that you think is a particular highlight or something you're most proud of?
It's hard to sum up a decade of work. I'm so proud and pleased I got to call exciting motor racing for 10 seasons. And that really was my entire pitch, how I got the job. And I got the job with, a very unusual route, doing local radio and working for a national newspaper, and then suddenly getting a TV gig without any previous TV is pretty rare. I had local radio, I had, sports agency stuff, but that is all I ever wanted to do. I used to watch the Formula 3000 program that they used to broadcast after F1 qualifying. I'm going to age myself terribly here. It was a little edit. It was like a magazine show. That's what you used to get. You never used to get the races live. Something like seeing Juan Pablo Montoya come through the ranks in Formula 3000, Mark Webber, Justin Wilson. I love single-seater motor racing. I always have. The chance to get to do it for 10 years was, I remember on the day I got the job, I said to my dad, can you imagine if I get to do this for 3 years? And we always talk about that. 2018 year with Albon, Norris, and Russell, they were brilliant off track, on track, and you knew you were watching pure motor racing talent. It's as simple as that. It was amazing. And also in that year, you had amazing characters like Artem Markelov. And the one thing I forgot to do in my final race, I was going to say Artem Markelov's name. I was going to shoehorn it in, but it was quite a chaotic end of year.
I never
Doing a
noticed.
doing a lot of broadcasting and yeah, a lot going on. And I got off there and I was like, I didn't say Artem Markelov. Because he used to do incredible things, didn't he? He used to come from the pit lane to the podium and he used to overtake 4 cars on the last lap.
It's funny you
And
mentioned that.
honestly, yeah,
Karen Bewaja on Instagram as well, one of the highlights, the one when Markelov overtook 4 to 5 cars in one corner at Austria.
my word, that's I think the only time my voice ever cracked on air because you it's a little graph for any aspiring commentators. It's a graph of you go up through the gears because you can't start up here because you will just run out of room, right? So you have to go up to the gears, and I ran out of room, and it was just a squeak on the straight as they headed down to turn 4. Yeah, it was, and he was such a fun character as well, and just was part of. He won because of the virtual safety car in 2016 in Monaco out of thin air, and that was an amazing result. And when Zach O'Sullivan won, almost completely like on a roll of the dice, I honestly that's because I had in my head that it was going to be my last year, and that moment where I was like, man, that's probably going to be the last complete crazy out of thin air. How and his only chance to win is if two guys crash in a very strange way at the exact moment, and it happens. That doesn't happen in any other championship other than Formula 2. And I loved Gasly versus Giovinazzi, Charles Leclerc just having the time of his life. And I go back to the Spa quote when he got chucked out of qualifying and he's just beaming and he's like, "Yeah, get to overtake some cars. How about that?" He's just like the guy knew he was brilliant. And then yeah, to go through that. Obviously, we had a very difficult year in 2019. That was reality, entering what would have been a bit of a sporting fairy tale until that point. And that was the dark side of the sport that we love. And then the strangeness of 2020, and cramming it all in, and then just getting to enjoy Piastri just taking off as the season went on, and then Dragovic winning with a team that doesn't normally win was
Mm.
fantastic. And then all the way through, and then one of a great lesson, a wonderful lesson for anyone following. For all the world, I would have said it's going to be Behrman versus Antonelli for the title, and yet we
Mm.
got something totally different and totally wonderful. So, yeah, beyond lucky, loved it, very grateful. That felt like my home team as well. Like incredibly fortunate to commentate on Formula One, but doing F2 felt like like a home club, like a home team, and it was an enormous wrench to give it up, and I shall miss it, but I'm very grateful to have the decade.
Just a quick one, and Josh, I appreciate you're still there. Thank you for your your patience. But just a
Thank
quick
you for
one.
listening to that monologue, Josh. I'm sorry about that.
I'm lapping up every second of it.
I can imagine. Exactly my words. It's what we're going to miss. But one of my favourite times of listening to you and commentators in general, and you mentioned Palmer and Brundle and Davide, and you've had so many good people in the comms box. But one of my favourite times to ever listen to you guys is always testing or FP1. I mean, it's a few years ago when Will was dropping in Star Wars quotes in testing because it's just us nerds listening. Did you feel that F2 and F3 was a little bit like that as well? That you were able to let loose a little bit more because this isn't going to tens of millions of people?
I think there was a before and after, right? I think there was I mean, I took it so seriously when I started. My pitch was, I'm going to treat this like Formula One, and I absolutely did. And I took it seriously all the way until the end. But because you'd get so many red flags and you'd get so many
Hmm.
interruptions, I tried to keep it very much in the early days. If we got an interruption, I'd be like trying to keep viewers watching. And then you get to the point where we got a washed out race in Spa with Brundle, and we're arguing over which East Anglian newspaper is the best because he's from Norfolk and I'm from Suffolk. And I'm thinking, this is, there's no racing to be, if there's racing on track, you've obviously got to talk about that. But, if there's a rain delay, then you can have a lot of fun with it. And the gallery were great. And we got to direct shots. And it's hilarious because we suddenly had the power and we had no idea of what to do. I think Brundle went for an onboard of a safety car, which is a terrible shout. I said, can we see Blanchimont? I mean, we wilted under that pressure. But no, I think the most fun thing by far has been with it has been the great moments, seeing the drivers progress, knowing that you're calling for future stars, quality of the overall motor racing, and the brilliant people I got paired with in the commentary box. Just phenomenal. How many people get to work with Palmer, Brundle, and Valsecchi? You're usually lucky if you get one of those in a pairing. And yeah, and there were so many other people as well. Like, we had a year where we would use Sky Talent, right? So I had the pleasure of working with Karun Chandok, Anthony Davidson, just absolutely phenomenal motorsport brain. And then Damon Hill got the short straw once, and Davide and I were laughing because you're like, this is a world champion. This is a world champion. He won the Italian Grand Prix in 1993 and 1994, and now he has to do a feeder series race with Davide and I effectively doing so. I remember there's a comment once where someone was like, this is basically wrestling commentary, and I have no idea to this day whether they meant it as a compliment or an insult, but I took it as a compliment. And then Damon Hill's there going, what on earth is going on? So, yeah, gold. Very, very fortunate.
I think I can speak for Josh and probably the rest of the audience. It was like watching with friends, having you guys in our ear. It's very rare that you can have feeder series friends close by in physical proximity because it is still quite niche. It's grown a lot. It's grown an awful lot, but it's still very niche. So to have you guys laughing and almost having the in-jokes, sitting in the living room and laughing at some of the ridiculous antics that happen. Coming back to you, Josh, and I've realised that we said about a preview in our intro. We've done absolute sod all of that.
This is
Really?
Josh gets to talk for 10 minutes, and then I get to talk for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to go off and make a cup of coffee, and then this is turned into a insane ramble chat.
This is what everybody missed.
Always the best ones come from such.
Exactly. If you want to get a coffee, Alex, and get ready for some Josh Revell 2025 preview stuff, go for it. Josh, let's talk a little bit about 2025. We've got a good 50 plus drivers to talk about if we're going to go for F2 and F3. So let's not go so specific about driver and driver, but let's maybe talk about what the situation's going to be for. I was thinking to go top to bottom. Prema at the top of the F3 Championship. Looking at Wikipedia. Thank you, Wikipedia. You help so much. And they've got Brandon Badua, Noel Leon, Ugo Chukwu, and then in F2, Sebastian Montoya, Gabriele Mini. Let's maybe do it this way, team by team in the championship. Any reflections on last year? It wasn't Prema's year at all in F2. And any thoughts on these 5 drivers we're talking about for 2025 or the team as a whole?
F3, they're held to a high pedestal because Prema are Prema. Like, they have been the ruler of the roost as long as basically, last decade, I would say. The last couple of years, they've kind of been dethroned in F3 by Trident, and in F2, it seems to be a bit of a free-for-all every year. Like, form does seem to switch around, and in general, there doesn't seem to be any particular top team in that category, which is a good thing. But in F3 this year, with Prema, they've got drivers in there who are quite good. I think it's the right way to put it. Like, Ugo, we've seen him in karting, and I think a lot of people were hyping him up, and rightly so. He's a damn good driver. His height's a bit concerning because I think he's already 6'2", and he's in F3. It's just like, oh boy, like, are you going to go down the
Josh,
mat?
I'm worried. I'm 6'4", and my excuse that I'm not a Formula One driver is I'm too tall. So if Ugo makes it, what the hell am I going to do?
Well, I mean, you would hope that even if he got to 6'4", that he'd still be in Formula One. But, there is a point where he gets to the point where they're too tall, and you hope that doesn't happen to him. If it ever does, end up going that route. Brando's shown some promise in, like, F4, Formula Regional, perhaps maybe not hitting the heights of the teammates that he's had, but it's to the point where you've got to pay him some attention, of course, and naturally he's got that pedigree brought forth by Luca, even though that pedigree is so horribly, unrepresentative of what Luca was as a driver. And then you got Noel Leon, whose name backwards spells Noel Leon. The sentence Noel Leon drives a race car, it's just like you got two of those backward things going on. But to not play the name thing up too much, Noel Leon is quite an underrated driver, in my view. Like, it doesn't seem as though he gets enough attention from what I've seen. He does, like, I'm not calling him a born-again Ayrton, but what I am saying is that he's now got a platform where he, without a doubt, is going to have more room to grow, to shine, and I think people are going to be surprised by what he can bring to the table this year. Whether or not he's going to be able to keep up with Ugo and Brando remains to be seen, but it is something I'm actually looking forward to personally, is seeing how much further he can take himself. With F2, I'm not overly sold on Montoya, which is a sentence I did not want to utter out in my life, especially growing up in 01, 02 and watching a Montoya and that Williams. I think the one way I could say it is that he's not quite to his father's level. It's like, and I don't think I'm going to be crucified over that, but who knows? I've had heaps of drivers prove me wrong. He's got a chance to do that this year, but he's got Mini in that seat, and Gabriele Mini has been outstanding in pretty much everything that he's done, right from Italian F4 to regional to F3, and he would have been a great champion last year, but you cannot be disappointed losing out on the championship the way that he did. You had to look at what happened that year and be like, I'm not even mad, but we'll get to that eventually. Still, though, I think F3 have a good bunch of drivers. Whether they'll win is dependent upon the package that the team overall can bring, because, there are other teams that can definitely mix up with them from a prep standpoint. F2 seemed last year, at the end of the year, they started to get on top of the car, which is good. And Mini, he did a bit more racing in F2 at the end of last year. He looked pretty handy as well. So,
not to put too much pressure on the F2 side of things, but we've had this influx, Josh, of this graduation to F1, so many drivers, and I feel like last year did seem like a particularly strong season in both championships. I don't know if I'm looking at both championships this year, it feels like it's almost F3 2, if you know what I mean. Like there's so many drivers who've jumped up from F3 this year, and I'm not saying that disparagingly, but I feel that the drivers who I'd be able to put the F3 drivers against, which is Jack Crawford, Kushmaini, Victor Martin, there's not as many drivers. I'm just like, okay, here's a good barometer. This is the Bearman to see if Antonelli's going to really be living up to the hype. Are you feeling that this year as well, the F2 grid on a whole?
I don't think so, because we've seen from the really good graduates of F3, they performed immediately. Like, what was it, 2021, where we had, like, Liam and Pastry and Drugo? They were immediately on it, I think, didn't Liam and Piastri win the first two races that year? Or was it Bobby Schwartzy?
Schwartzman had a shock at the start of that year, but I can't remember the exact. But yeah, Liam and that Bahrain race, which Alex would have been calling, with the three Alpine drivers going hammer and tongs at it into the first quarter, it was terrific.
Liam won the first race. And then there's that amazing camera angle where there's no other way to say it. They'd gone to the shot too early. They'd gone to the shot 1 second too early, and what they got was art, because you had three of them, and Piastri. That was amazing, fantastic draw for the win. Lundgaard was involved in that. It's all a really exciting blur at this point. Was Joe the third driver in that battle? Yeah. Amazing. So yeah, that was Piastri announcing himself to the world. But as you quite correct. It was those two opening up. So yeah.
Who needs Wikipedia when you've got Alex Jacques who can just confirm that Lawson was winning the race? It's magic, this.
I mean, it's been said. I believe you've said it. Jacques said it. I think a lot of knowledgeable people in the sport have said, generally, drivers can come into F2 and not win the championship, because there's more than one factor that goes into winning even a Spec Series championship. But they'll perform in one way or another pretty fast into the 10-year. So they themselves they set the benchmark in a way. If the driver coming from F3 is good enough, they're going to display it almost immediately. So they're not being that many F2, many retaining drivers in F2 this year. There are some. There's Martin, there's Vershaw being in there about as long. He's the new Markov in a way, just like, you're still here. Nice. We love you though. Like all that good jazz. There are still some people in there. And a lot of them, especially Martin and Vershaw, we know how good they are. They are astoundingly good. So that's a plenty good benchmark on its own. So, I mean, I don't know. We've had a slew of new F3 drivers come up every year. And generally, the ones that are always held to a high regard always make their presence felt almost immediately. Yeah, I think this year will carry on that same old narrative.
Let's stick with you just for a quick second then, because this one's much quicker to go through. Invicta Racing F2 champions, which is something, I don't know, I'm surprised to say it in some ways, but Leonardo Fornaroli also surprised as a champion. What a season he had, just an epitome of consistency. And Roman Stanek joining him as well. I think you were alluding to something in your previous messaging about Fornaroli's made the step up. Can he follow in Bortoletto's footsteps, doing the same?
But Fornaroli, personally, no. And that's not necessarily too much of a swipe at Fornaroli. It's just, it's a very rare thing to do the back-to-back, which is why we hold those champions to high regard. I don't see Fornaroli being quite that driver in terms of out-and-out pace, but he did win that championship against a highly rated Mini, and the way in which he won it was special. Now, I wanted Mini to win because of just the talent that he is, and also because I predicted him to win. I thought, okay, this is going to be some claps. But that last lap battle between, it was Mini, Mansell, best wishes out to Mansell, by the way, and Fornaroli. That last lap battle was astounding. You had Mansell had no nose cone on. I thought this is like watching a 1982 battle where half the cars had no nose cones by the 75th percentage of the race, and it was just great. Get to the first chicane, doesn't pass him. Second chicane, doesn't pass him again, and you just think the momentum, the way that Monza is, it's all game set and match now. There's no winning this for Fornaroli. Then he sends it into the Parabolica, and my jaw's on the floor the whole time. And I'm guessing it was the same for everyone out there watching, where you're just like, what the hell? And like, they cross the line, and I'm like, that is the coolest thing I have ever seen in my life. Just the last lap, all or nothing, Hail Mary into the last corner, and he pulls it off. Like, that to me was racing. That is symbolic of why we watch this sport, is for moments like that. F2 though, it's a bit difficult because Invicta definitely looked like the better team last year. It wasn't just Borto at the front. Maini was also showing great pace as well. So in theory, he's got a good base to go off of, but he's got Stanek there. And Roman Stanek is a dude who had quite a bit of hype around him from the junior series.
It's exciting for sure, and you've also made me a bit more excited, thinking maybe I'm a bit too quick to write off a championship just because there's a lot of drivers stepping up. We talked about Piastri and Bortoletti, they all stepped up, and the rest is history, as they say. I'm going to come back to Mr. Jakes and reflecting on the past as well. You've kind of spoke about it a little bit based off your history.
It's my 10 minutes now, is it? It's my 10 minutes.
Your 10 minutes.
Right, here we go. This is the strangest recording of a podcast I've ever been part of. This is, I don't know how this is going to sound in the edit.
It's a free-for-all. We're all just wanting to talk about cars go around in circles. We're a strange bunch as it is. But talk about cars not go around in circles. This is one of the things I highlight from Ian Hack. Filling creatively when sessions were delayed or interrupting, finding amusing, informative, and entertaining things to say. It can't be easy. And if you want to learn how to fill for the inevitable red flags that we're going to have in F1, just become an F2 or an F3 commentator, because safety cars and red flags, that's where the feeder series excels. How do you fill that air when there's just so many delays?
I've got a master's degree in filling red flags across the last 10 seasons. If it's a serious one, it's the hardest thing you'll do in broadcasting, right? If it's a rain delay or a sign has fallen down or a massive oil leak has gone out on the track and they've got the concrete dust out, it is an absolute joy, because Alex Brundle is going to witter on about motor racing, whether you're on air, whether you're off air, whether it's the weekend, whether it's a WhatsApp voice note. So you can utilize all of that to your advantage. I mean, some of the daftest and most fun moments have come in those delays. And at that point, you're under no pressure. It can't possibly be good. You're looking at a high motion replay of a safety car going over a curb, finding out whether it's too wet to race. You can't be expected to do any good broadcasting. And the removal of that expectation means that you go to weird and wonderful places. And yes, there was a lot of fun filling non-serious red flags and rain delays and looking at shots in the crowd and but it's yeah, a lot of fun,
How
lot
is
of
it?
fun on the broadcast.
How is it when you're doing it from Biggin Hill and you're?
Mm,
I get the sense when you're in the gantry, you'll be able to look over and be like, okay, the rain looks like it's calming down a little bit, or the safety car's just gone past, and I can see such and such has just jumped into the pit lane. But then
yeah.
you're doing it with five screens instead, and
Mm.
I'm guessing it's a bit more Hail Marying.
Well, you're live regardless, right? So that's the joy of live TV. Sometimes it's incredibly exciting, and Artem Markelov is overtaking four cars on the last lap. Sometimes you're just looking at the weather, and you know that, for instance, in Belgium last year rather, I knew there was absolutely no chance. We were at Biggin Hill, and I knew there was absolutely no chance that we were going to go racing. I've done enough races in Belgium to know it was just too wet from what we were seeing from the footage there. So you don't always have to be on site to know that the rain level is getting to a certain point and you're not going to be going racing. At that point, you're like, okay, this is an hour of television going out on some major sports channels, and I know for a fact there is not going to be a race. Yeah, that's when you're like, okay, well, this is ridiculous, but we have an hour of time to fill before the satellite window closes and everyone can move on with their broadcasting schedules.
It's a little bit like hosting a podcast sometimes, Alex. You've got an hour of nonsense to fill. Filling time as well. Let's go back to you, Josh, and maybe we'll whiz through a few more teams and drivers quickly for 2025. I feel like we've gone through the hitters, the bigger hitters in F2. We're going to go ART. We've got through the next one in F3, which is the order I was going through. In fact, no, we've got Trident because I skipped straight ahead with to Invictus. So we've got Noam Stromstead, Mercedes driver, Rafael Kamara, Charlie Butts, and then Trident in F2, Sam Migatunev, and Max Esterson. Briefly, thoughts on these guys?
On that big Monza battle, that season finale, it was Megan Zunif who won that race. So I don't know what to say about that F2 lineup because it does, there's potential with both those dudes. They've never quite, well, the exception of Megatsunov, who last year was with Trident, who was a good out and out F3 team. Esterson, we've seen some sparks from him, I guess. Never quite something that made us think should be an F2. So how he's going to cope, well, that'll be interesting. Megatsunev, I think, will do about as well as any rookie going into an F2 Trident will do. I think that's about it. I don't know whether or not that's going to mean finishing any better than, a podium or two throughout the year. Who knows? It's a bit of an unknown quantity, him going into that team. F3 though will be more interesting. Charlie Wirtz has got the Formula Regional Oceania Championship behind him. He has got that. There's a good history of drivers who win in particular circumstances with that team. So you never know. Do I think he's the next Austrian superstar in Formula One? I'll move on. Noah, though, he has been recently announced as the Merc Jr. Good for him. Seen some good stuff from him as well. And Trident as well is going to provide the platform for him to show his stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes. But Rafael Kamara, he was lumped in with that group of Prema drivers a couple years ago alongside the likes of Kimi Antonelli. And he's got the potential to go far, and you would have to say where he's come from, the backing he's got from the Ferrari Driver Academy, and again, did I say this twice? Where he's at now with Trident in F3, you'd have to say that at least he's going to be a contender for the championship this year. Having said that, though, it is a totally new car this year in F3, and as we saw last year in F2, some teams will get on top of that a bit faster than others, and by the time some teams catch up and be like, we got the understanding of the car now, it could be too late. So yeah, who knows?
Good lineups throughout the F3 grid, look through it. We'll be here for 7 hours if you go through them all individually, so we'll whiz through a few in a little bit. I'm conscious I don't want to take Alex all day. He's got Australia to go and explore as well. But there are a few more points I do want to bring up, some memories from our followers. This one is in Abu Dhabi. You mentioned the previous intake, and Fennec Waffle, great name, remembers your commentary on Leclerc versus Albon in Abu Dhabi. And I do have another Abu Dhabi memory as well. Where has it gone? Where's it gone? Where's it gone? There's a wheel in there. As
That's old school.
that is
That's
proper
old
old school.
school.
I had
Yeah.
to look that up. That preceded my time, and I found it on YouTube. And it was like, wow, that was almost a bad
I
moment
think,
in GP2.
yeah, I think that's done the rounds on TikTok as a perfectly cut scream. I think that's how that moment has continued to have a shelf life. And yeah, Albon versus, it was so good that year. Alex Albon had broken his shoulder and he hadn't really had a very good debut season. And suddenly he was looking like the driver that we knew he could be. And Charles Leclerc was like, cool story. I'm still going to try and budge you out of the way and win the race. Yeah, so that was hugely exciting. And I love it. Yeah, a lovely moment commentating with Davide, a thrilling battle, last race of the season. I can still remember now the brilliant shot of the two of them separated by hardly anything, all the dust, dirt, the marbles, and a brilliant move. And yeah, it was Charles Leclerc's championship. I mean, I don't want to say it's obviously a penalty, but if that was Formula One, it would obviously be a penalty. But who cares? It was great. It was great. And what I always liked about Charles and Alex is that when Alex had that poor, by the standards of the team he was with, year and broke his shoulder, Charles Leclerc was a massive proponent, and including when he got promoted to Formula One and the next year, he was always saying, don't forget about Alex Albon. Alex Albon is rapid. And I think sometimes those moments go a long way to, oh, okay, Charles Leclerc still thinks Albon's going to be a factor. Like, he kept his name in the conversation, then Albon gets himself back to Formula One. And I thought it was there's a mark of respect between those two, even if he did barge him out of the way at the hairpin. And yeah, great camaraderie from that wave of drivers who came through in 2017 and 2018.
You see a difference in them, these drivers. I remember in the first year when Albon was struggling, so it must have been the Red Bull year, when Albon was struggling in the Red Bull and George Russell was saying some things about like Albon just isn't that slow. It's something's going on.
Yeah.
And I feel that when these drivers make that step up, I mean, George Russell's been PR'd since he was in nappies, so but there are some bits where they get more restrained. I feel. Do you see a difference in the driver outside of the driving standards in how they speak to the media and what
Yeah.
insights you get off them and how it
Of
changes?
course, of course. It gets more rigid. It gets more controlled. You're not just speaking for yourself and the investment that you put in the team and the Formula Two Championship and that you're speaking. You're suddenly wearing the logos of massive companies. So it's always going to tighten up. The one thing I would say is that when it comes to the serious stuff, or when it comes to moments like backing a driver or making their voice heard, the definite change that you've had in the last decade is that every driver has that space if they need that space. And I think Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel have almost carved that out for the drivers. That George got a little bit ratty about the Pirelli tires and then had to row it all the way back potentially to the boathouse the next race. But, when a driver potentially is not having an easy time, they're all coming out to bat for them. So on the important stuff, I think the drivers absolutely can say whatever they want. And yeah, the camaraderie and the respect level, I certainly saw that was very, very high from that wave onwards. And if you compare it to say 20 years ago, I think the drivers are way more respectful. There's less like fake macho bravado and all of that nonsense. And I think there's just a healthy level of respect and admiration because they know how long these journeys take and they know how easily they can fall away. Alex Albon and another life doesn't even get to Formula One, which would have been completely unacceptable, really, if you consider how talented he is. And if he has a great season up against Carlos Sainz, then suddenly everyone leans forward and goes, oh, hold on a minute. He has progressed since the Red Bull days. He is on the caliber of a multiple race winner. And yeah, okay, Alex Albon's a contender for the future. These things can change around. There are so many sliding doors moments as a result. I've personally won the battle to see who would quit the podcast first. And
If you're
I'm
watching rather than
delighted.
listening, Josh Revell has disappeared off somewhere, maybe with a dodgy
Yeah, I
internet
did it.
connection.
I walked Revel. There we are. I walked Josh off the podcast. Great battle with him, I got to say. great battle, great guy, like his work, but he couldn't stay the course. But yeah, there you go. The
There is
drivers having each other's backs is great, and I love it.
there are a few things. I don't want to keep you all day. There are a few things. Well, one, a personal question from me: your relationship with the drivers as well.
Mm,
From I feel it's a strange one, and this is going behind the curtain a little bit. That as a feeder series journalist, somebody who covers it, you do build a relationship with several of the drivers.
yeah,
Obviously, they come on the podcast, we keep in touch, and they do get. And it's not a criticism, they do get more guarded the higher they go. There's suddenly a
yeah.
championship and a Formula One seat on the line, and the text messages get fewer and far between. But do you find with your on site frequency, I guess, that there
Mm.
is almost like it's you, Alex. You know me from way back when. Do you find that they appreciate
Yeah.
that a little bit?
I definitely find that with Formula One, yeah, it's been useful. The real world, right? You have this long-term relationship where you know someone. If you knew someone in the office for 10 years and you knew them when, they're on the back foot, and yeah, it makes interviews really easy. It makes getting information easier than it would do if you'd not covered them at junior level. But equally, they've got a job to do. It's not like you're palling around. It's not like you're playing paddle with them in the hotel. It's you know them, you're working with them. They've got a job to do, you've got a job to do. But yeah, I think it helps. I think it helps from my point of view telling their story. Knowing the
Mm.
background, knowing the tough times as well as the good times, that I think is a massive help for me when a landmark moment comes along for Lando or Charles Leclerc or George Russell, or when you've seen the early work, if you like,
Hmm.
that's when it counts the most, I think.
You were in the crowd when they were just there in a little pub, and now they're headlining Glastonbury or something. It's that sort of
Mm.
thing, right? Killen J Berg on Instagram. What are your favorite Alex Jacques F2 commentary highlights? F3 as well should be in there, but literally any time he spoke. How about that? That's a nice one, isn't it? You won't be able to see it, those watching, but there is about 4 pixels I'm getting of Josh at the moment, so I'm not sure if that's my internet connection or his. Alex, I want to make sure we can let you go and enjoy Australia a little bit more. But there are multiple people talking about, well, not necessarily a highlight, but things that they remember. Of course, it comes up. OpenJNL on Instagram, the way and his words he gave after the Hubert accident, and Dan W. 1623. This one of the hardest moments as a commentator he will ever have to narrate, and he handled both the Sunday at Spa and the F2 round, and the next week at Monza with absolute class and respect. And then also over on X, Twitter, whatever we call it these days, Ocon Agenda, the way he handled the 2019 Monza weekend was incredible. And then Aswin Sanjaya put in the emotional intro Alex Jacques gave at Monza. I feel you were involved in this. You were the voice to so many people of such a horrific time. But the way you handled it was so professional, and you can't prepare for it. How did you go through that? Because it is going to be one of those things which will be forever your voice on Feeder Series and F2 history.
When the sport that brings you joy suddenly brings you heartbreak, you are confronted with a choice: stop and despair, or endure and continue. The drivers of Formula 2 who reject despair, not because they do not grieve, but because they are determined in their defiance. Know this with certainty: Anthoine Hubert will never be forgotten. He was special on and off the track, and the 17 on the grid today choose to honour him. They choose to race.
Yeah, it's just horrendous. The whole thing was utterly horrendous. I spoke earlier on about how much I've loved it, and it means the world to me, and it'll mean the world to me in decades time. I'm a motor racing fan, and to get the opportunity to do it, I trade it all to make Spa 2019 go away. That's as simple as that. It was an awful moment. It was cruel, and I felt if they give you the job and there are good times, you have a huge amount of responsibility if you're holding the microphone in the bad times. And I think that's where my words on the Sunday and my words the week after came from, because I felt a responsibility to a couple of things there. I felt a responsibility to the championship. I was horror struck by what I'd witnessed. We'd lost someone amazing, someone else who was just a great guy who was fighting for his life. These are not things that we're used to with modern motor racing. And certainly in that week, I felt a responsibility to And it was driven by the drivers. We did it. They were on a fan stage, and I'd gone into the paddock. And at Arden, there was just a portrait of Anthoine there, which is just, there's a cold horror to that. That you speak to someone 3 hours before the race, and then 1 week later, there's just artwork of them. And then I saw all the drivers. I saw all the drivers individually, and they were so determined and defiant to get on with it, to go back racing, that there's a collective determination in the paddock, from the paddock staff, from the drivers, from the teams, that let's get back out there and show what we're made of. There was complete uniform agreement that that was the right thing to do, but you've got to get the audience up. And then that's the other side of it. People enjoy motor racing when times aren't the easiest. It's the thing that people look forward to at the weekend. At its best, it's compelling and amazing live sport. And ultimately, it's fun, and it's somewhere glamorous, and the action is vivid. And then when reality invades and you get something awful, and the real world effectively creeps in, and we watch this brilliantly talented and great person, not just a great driver, not just an F1 prospect, but a brilliant person, is suddenly gone. That's a lot to deal with. That's where the words came from. It's the most brutally honest I've ever been with an audience on air. I hope I have to do nothing close to that ever again. That's the risk with motor racing. It's the most thrilling thing in the world, but on days like that, it's bloody cruel.
I feel I can't relate it in the same way as you. Haven't covered this, but I was in the paddock for Frecker at Barcelona at 23, and I didn't actually speak to Delano, but walked past him. I think he'd been involved in a crash with his teammate. Obviously, what happened subsequently in the following weeks, months, when that happened, it shook me in a way that it's almost like you forget until you go into the paddock. And I've been fortunate enough to be there in F2, F3, F1, that they aren't just names on a timing tower and faces on television. You're not losing your favorite TV character from the TV show, but the actor's fine. It was knowing that this kid, and you really see them as kids as well, was gone from the world. And I feel the way that you were able to remind people, this isn't television. You're not watching fiction right now. You're watching reality.
That's what makes it so compelling, right? It makes it compelling because, whole families remortgage their houses so that their kid can have a chance. They're in freezing go-kart tracks so that there might be a possibility. They have to bring along their siblings. They have to change careers. They have to limit their dreams. And, sometimes it would upset me. Sometimes it would give me like a little bit of comfort that, Hubert family started a journey laying cones out in a car park, and they got to the Grand Prix weekend. And that was an amazing achievement for them. Motor racing can break your heart sometimes, but things that you love can do that. Yeah, rough. And I just want to say to the family and the people connected that day, the way they handled themselves, the dignity that they showed throughout, they're remarkable people. And I hope they found like a degree of peace as the years go on, because it won't ever fade away. And we, as I said in my outro, my final minute of ramblings on air, we won't let Antoine Hubert be forgotten. I am so pleased I got to do the commentary because I lost my voice in Bahrain. So Chris McCarthy had to sub for me in Bahrain at the start of last year for a race that he wasn't down to do. I just lost my voice. But basically, our contracts, I was one race down, so I owed them a race, and I was like, okay, I'll do the main race on the Sunday. And of course, I thought I'd missed Juan Manuel getting the podium. He gets disqualified for the podium, and then gets it the next day. That was awesome. That was just awesome to do. And yeah, I'm really, really glad that I got to call him back onto the podium.
Oh, I feel this is we're having so much fun, and you said it rightly that it's a sport that when you love it so much, it can bring so many highs and so many lows. But let's not end your time with the podcast on that. You told some ridiculous stories before about most of them involving Davide taking selfies, getting changed, all the ridiculous things. Is there anything? I feel that there's no way that you and Brundle, even Palmer, have got away with some of these ridiculous. Davide's a law unto himself, of course, but Brundle and Palmer, you guys are really in sync with each other. There must be some things that you guys have just cracked up, even during the broadcast, which you'll never know about until now because we don't see you. Is there anything that jumps out in your mind before we let you go?
Brundle and I used to have stupid running jokes, and it would be who could smuggle it in to make the other one laugh, and if you broke, you lost. So we would do that, and he would do it like in the final minute of qualifying, and I'd be like, "Not now. This is incredibly important. I'm trying to read a timing page." And we do a lot of those. I have to say, I have to really thank Alex because he put up with me being. We did commentary like this, which as we can see from the 4 pixels of Mr. Revell at the moment, like it's not always perfect when you do commentary over a laptop like this. So he was very, very good, and to do it in different places, I was so pleased that we got to do it. So he would smuggle in like running jokes that the audience wouldn't pick up on, but would make me laugh enormously. Yeah, Palmer, I owe Palmer a lot because he was incredibly helpful in my first year when I was learning the ropes. Yeah, Davide was something else, and he just was a treat. The most recent time I was in the commentary box with Davide was covering Formula One, but I don't think we've told this story. Anyway, he stands up. He's got to go and be the pundit with Laura in the paddock, and he's on the other side of the circuit. So he has to leave 5 minutes before. He stands up, claps me on the back, and nearly takes the entire mixing desk with him because he'd not taken his headphones off. And we were so close to destroying an entire com box. Like it teeters on the very brink of just going over. And it would have been, I'm not exaggerating, it would have been thousands of pounds of damage. It would have just been so many block caps emails. It would have been a total nightmare. But the one I will tell you that I've never told before, and I don't know why it sprung into my head. Paul Ricard, there was a problem with my monitor. And all I ever used to get for F2, different for F1, you get way more timing pages. But for F2, I got a timing page and what you saw at home. 2 screens, that's it. Timing page and what you saw at home. I'd come into the box. I'd just done, I think I'd done another commentary, and I'd come into the com box and hadn't got long to set up. And we're going on air, and I'm like, this isn't working. It's on, but there's no feed. So what on earth are we going to do here? This is crazy. And I don't often panic. In fact, I very, very rarely panic on air. But I'm like, well, there's no way around this, and we're in trouble here. We're really in trouble here. I'm not going to be able to call the start of the race. And I'm trying to WhatsApp to Brundle going, you might have to call this. Like, really sorry about that. Hope your driver ID is great, mate, because you might have to do the start of a race. And I'm panicking, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to throw him under the bus to do that because that would be really, really intense. And I'm looking around. Both my monitors are down. They're just gone. The feed is the wrong feed. And I'm like panicking, and I'm like buzzing through, and it's just noise and it's chaos. And then suddenly my sound guy picks up his TV and presses his monitor, cables everywhere, presses his monitor to my glass window. So he's one combox along. Not every combox has this, but Paul Ricard has like tiny windows at the end, like that much. And so I did it off about a third of a screen whilst they fixed the feed problem. And I'm like, there's a move in the background there. I was like, generic, just keep it as generic as possible. And it took them a lap and a half to get the main monitor back. And I always commentate standing up. And that one, I just slumped in a chair. I'd sweated all my adrenaline out in those 90 seconds. And yeah, it was the best job. I loved it, but occasionally you had to commentate on a TV through a window in order to do opening lap.
Wow, that's brand new information. I had no idea. Do you remember what year that was for France?
The
one with the really bad opening lap calling, I guess.
Yeah, really ropey. Might have been. I'm honestly not sure.
I'm gonna have to go back and
I want
find
to say it's the
some now.
year. I want to say it's the year Awassa won by miles. I want to say it's that year.
It's
So
quite
I
recent
can't,
then.
yeah, it was panic stations. I'll tell you that. I also want to say before I jump off, I want to say the best of luck to Chris McCarthy. He's going to do brilliant, original, thoughtful, empathetic commentary I can't wait to listen. He's worked so hard for it. Will came at it from a different direction. I came at it from a different direction. Chris is going to make it his own, and I can't wait to listen. It's going to be really, really weird. I got to be honest. Like the lights going off in Melbourne, I'm probably going to go for a long walk, in all honesty, and watch it back on F1 TV, because it will be odd. And I think the first time I'm at Biggin Hill and it's Alex Brundle and Chris McCarthy, it's going to be like spotting your ex in a restaurant. Okay, all right, got someone new, have you? Fine.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. As you probably could tell, we had some technical difficulties with Josh Revell. I know a lot of you, we saw the comments, were excited for some sort of preview or review with Josh. We did try and record it. Unfortunately, it didn't happen this time, but we will try our best to get something at the end of the season for a season review. For now, though, thank you everybody for watching and listening, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please tell a friend. We'd love to get our subscriber count right up so we can give you so much more content throughout the season. Until then, you can follow us on feeder_series on X or Twitter. You can follow us on feederseriesnet on Instagram, and you could go to the website to read all of the latest articles from our fabulous editors at feederseries.net. Until next time, we have been the Feeder Series Podcast. Goodbye.